I love describing things. I use analogies and metaphors for just about everything that I talk about in everyday life. I find that communication is the great divider at times.
At times?
I'm being nice.
I think communication is, if we had to put a pin in one thing, that if we learn to do it better, it would change the entirety of our experience. I think communication is that one thing.
I'm so glad that I'm recording on my other devices early, because that was gold, like absolute gold, because you are speaking such truth, right? And I feel like if we had actually taken the time to understand what goes behind language, because language is the last thing in a chain of events that give you what you're trying to explain to somebody who has no idea what the cultural needs are behind those words, because they don't exist in their culture. So to be able to try to do a one-for-one swap with words is completely insane, because it doesn't work, because they have words for things that we haven't described yet, and vice versa. So when they're telling you they're trying to defend something from a certain stance, you don't know what the driver is behind that, because you've never put a label on that, because it doesn't exist in your reality.
And so my favorite question in that environment is when someone will ask me a question with what I call a buzzword. Like, man, that's a really great question. Do me a favor, though. Tell me what that means to you, so that I'm sure I'm actually answering the question you're asking.
Ooh, I like that. That's sage advice.
It opens dialogue.
It does.
Instead of
debate,
of setting the stage for a debate.
Debate solves nothing.
Right.
It is the worst way to come to any kind of agreement or to find common ground. It's the absolute worst way. And we're watching that.
World. That's what we want to do. We want to debate everything because we have to be right. We're right fighters.
We absolutely are. So before we go any further, AmiLynne Carroll, better known as Babs to her friends. So I wanted to make sure that I was allowed to call you Babs, because you said to your friends.
We are all friends.
There we go. I love to hear that.
Pieces of our soul waiting to be reunited. There are no strangers.
I like that. It's stained glass.
That's right.
It's stained glass. You'll find your spot as long as you act accordingly to your authentic piece.
Yes, sir.
So Babs is a cancer survivor, stroke survivor. You've overcame so many life challenges, and you've been on the forefront. You've done TED Talks, and you're somebody that embodies the new now, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I hope that that resonates with people after we get done with this conversation. But thank you for coming on the show. I genuinely appreciate you. Please tell us about yourself.
Well, I think you've covered it. I mean, I am no different than you or your listeners. Life happens to me each and every day, the same as it does to you and the audience, those who have tuned in today. No matter where you tune in from, life happens. And so the difference maybe between me and someone else is I've been afforded enough opportunities to evaluate how I look at how life happens. And I no longer think of life as happening to me, but that I'm a part of that unfoldment, and I get to decide, I get to choose, even in the most sticky of situations, how I'm going to show up. And that is what, in my opinion, makes the difference between someone that goes along to get along and may find themselves in a place of overwhelm or depression, or just not being able to figure it out because it all feels so dark, to being that person who says, you know what? I will either hold that flashlight until you see the light for yourself. And I'm also learning how to ask someone else to hold that flashlight for me when I feel too weak to do so for myself. And that is almost more important than holding a light for someone else,
Well, isn't the concentration of all the people around you that you impact bringing more flashlights and giving a greater picture? It illuminates such a larger area when people work together with their lights. If you go off in opposite directions, you're only going to find small things. If you bring yourself together, you're going to have a greater opportunity to find bigger and better things.
Absolutely. Well, and it's also, if we take this light analogy, I love that you love analogies like this because I do too, is this idea of a light, the flashlight. Think about the volume of light that a flashlight can put out. And I'm not talking about the wattage to the battery or the size
Candle
of the
watt
light.
Power or something. Really.
Exactly.
One of our listeners is probably out there. He's like a hunter and he's got spotlights and he's like, well, that's a 50,000 candle watt, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not you.
Exactly. What I'm talking about is how focused that light is. Think about a flashlight. You put it up against the wall. It's got a very narrow illumination spot. You pull that flashlight back a bit and it illumines more. It lightens more area. And so in this analogy that we're talking about here, that being the light for others or asking for others to be the light for you in a moment of darkness, it's all the perspective of where those lights are coming from and recognizing that they all come together, whether they're focused or whether they've taken a step back. But every one of those lights is important to help us light our way.
I absolutely love that. And I believe that the further you back up, the larger your perspective can become. And if you're not moving back at the same pace, just know that you're providing somebody else with a way to look over their shoulder and maybe not trip because your light is already behind them, right? It's all about just doing what you're made to do. If you do that, then you're setting an example for other people to be able to be as authentic as they want, right? And that it's safe. And that it should be that way. And it's the easiest role in life to play.
And we each have our own light. And I think where we come into a challenge is when we've adopted someone else's as our own. I call it borrowed belief. Yeah, or have been issued. But to be issued something, we must also be willing to receive it. If we are carrying around a light that doesn't light our way, it is appropriate to say it was issued to us. But in order to properly set that light down that doesn't belong to us, we must also acknowledge that at some point we took ownership of that light.
Absolutely.
And it carried us.
That's the paradox is realizing that your hand is gripping the light that you shouldn't have. That it's so simple to you can simply let it go and it'll hit the ground and you can move on. We choose to keep things in our lives longer than they need to be. In fact, I'm glad we're having this conversation because the source of our issues don't necessarily come from within. And we always think that, right? But we will reach out and find problems. We will look for things to create a state of being for ourselves that we don't need to be in. And I'm going to use a real world analogy right now, a real world scenario that I'm going through. I had two different things that happened today where I was communicating with someone and it was just negative, right? And I didn't like the negativity in it and it kind of stuck with me. And then later in the day, I have a situation that I've been dealing with for many years that's always in a negative scenario, which you think that would be a clue for me to just not care any further. But I was sitting there texting my wife and I said, these two things happened today and I am not happy at the moment. But neither one of them happened in my home. They're not here. So how in the hell am I boiling when I'm not even in their pot? It doesn't make sense.
And yet we think our society teaches us, especially here in Western civilization, society teaches us that we are our brother's keeper. And so to not show up for that negative voice or not show up for that decades long negative relationship, then somehow is an indictment against who we are. Because the belief would be we are our brother's keeper. But what if we are not our brother's keeper, but we are our brother? Showing up in those two situations can take on a very different experience.
That's extremely deep. And you know what? I would like you to elaborate on the brother scenario in that analogy, because I want to make sure that I get this correct. Because if it is what I think it is, it's amazing regardless. But I think that people could benefit from another step from it.
Right. Well, it goes back to what we were talking about just a moment ago about looking externally or looking internally.
Mm-hmm.
And when we adhere to the borrowed belief that we are our brother's keeper, it's conditioned thinking, program thinking. Borrowed belief is what I choose to call it, because borrowed belief says, I have some accountability in this too. So it keeps the balance of justice, if you will, in tune.
Shame game.
Shame game, exactly. But it's not about shaming yourself. It's about being accountable for the choices and decisions that we're making along the way. And remembering that while I may not be my brother's keeper, guess what? I'm going to use another analogy that we've all heard. Well, you've made your bed, so now you've got to lie in it, right? You've made a commitment to this brother to be present for him or her in one way or another at whatever level. And even if it's not been an overt commitment, our willingness to continue showing up in that space is our commitment to showing up in that space for our brother. And if we are looking at that showing up as something that we are doing for another person, it shifts our mentality, especially if it's not an environment that feels really comfortable to us. Maybe there's negativity. Maybe there's challenges that they've been experiencing forever. And if they just get out of their own way, surely they could see how much better their life would be. But no, they continue to rehearse the narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're allowing the continuation of the rehearsing of that narrative by continuing to show up in a way where we think we're obligated to do so. But what if our purpose in showing up is to be a mirror, is to be a reflection of, is to be an extension of what that person is experiencing? Because I believe that we are all expressions of one divine mind. Mm-hmm. There's one creator source. I don't care what you call it. God, Allah, Fred,
spaghetti monster.
I really don't care. As we were saying earlier, words are words. It's important that we understand what another means by them. But if we are all but an expression of divine mind, that means our origin is all the same. So my sister, who may be really struggling with something, and maybe she's been really struggling with it for 15 years, if I continue to show up in a way that where the mentality is, I am my sister's keeper, I'm trying to fix, I'm trying to change, I'm trying to orchestrate, I'm trying to just get through. Maybe what I'm trying to do is to make myself feel better because I tolerate and put up with this behavior repeatedly. Look at what a good friend I am. But if we take the vantage point of not I am my sister's keeper, but I am my sister, I am an extension of this person who's having this elongated challenge. How can I be a reflection for them so that they can see where they're at? Because it's not until we see where we're at, we can't change what we don't acknowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest gift that we can give to another in that space is to reflect back to them what the world is receiving from them. Because nobody wakes up and says, you know what? I'm going to be a pain in someone's ass today. I'm going to be obstinate and contrary and contradictory. Like, that's just who I am, rebel, maverick. Nobody wakes up that way.
Nope.
But if we go back to that original conversation you and I were having about communication, if we're not taught how to communicate, then we think we're separate because we don't understand the unifying portion of being an extension of one another. And if I can recognize a spot in my own experience where for maybe longer than I wished, I was not in a good space with one idea or another. And I continued to show up. People do the best they can with what they know. But if I can be a mirror, if I can be that reflection so that my sister can see what it is that she's putting out into the world, what that really is an invitation for her to do the work she needs to do, or for him to do the work that he needs to do so that he is being received the way he wants to be. I don't think people wake up in the morning and want to be the most negative thing that happens in someone else's life today, or this week, quarter, month, year, decade. But we get stuck in this rut because we don't have a travel partner in our corner that will help us walk out of that corner.
I absolutely love this.
If I can be my sister, if I can see myself in her, if I can be my brother, if I can see my challenges either existing or having been overcome, then it allows me to be in a more compassionate place. It doesn't mean I let them drone on for forever about the negative stuff in their life. But if they're not feeling judged by my presence, my sister's keeper, if they're feeling a sense of resonance, it just might be the invitation that they need to show up differently for themselves. And if they're showing up differently for themselves, guess who gets the benefit to that? We do.
Right.
There's no more texting the wife. Got two situations and you know what both of them are, and it's the same old. And why am I bubbling inside? I'm boiling inside because I think that there's something I need to be doing that could fix that. It's an unspoken responsibility that we latch onto.
Well, it's layered on from birth.
Right.
That's why I call it the shame game.
Make other people happy.
Correct.
No, it's not.
I like when you use the mirror analogy for showing up for the person in your life that may be in the throes of despair for whatever reason. And 99% of the time, it's self-inflicted in some way, shape, or form. The mirror does not enable.
It also doesn't make excuses.
No. Enabling is one of the biggest problems there are out there. When you lend a hand in comforting someone in how they're treating themselves, you're rewarding them for self-deprecation.
Exactly. And where then is the invitation to move out of that place of challenge?
The victim chair has cup holders and it reclines.
It does.
It's so comfortable.
And in 2024, there's remote controls and voice controls. You don't even have
an AI massaging victim chair. I'm in.
Exactly.
Right? Why would you ever get up?
Well, we get up when we realize that that is not sustainable. We get up out of that chair when we realize that having things done for us in that way, it may have served a purpose. Or it would not have come about to begin with. So there's no need to vilify it. There's no need to cancel it. There's no need to, deprecate it in a way that, again, vilifies it. But if we literally can say, okay, this isn't working for me. What's the next question I need to ask? Because oftentimes what got us to what's not working for us is by asking the wrong questions. And when we don't get the answers we're looking for, we're depressed, we're frustrated, we're angry, we're bitter. So instead of asking a different question, we just ask the same question over and over again in 5 different ways, 15 different ways. Right.
Because
so
you
for
ask.
me, it's all the mindset of why not me? And that sounds so coy. Like, okay, great, woo-woo, why not me? Well, no, what is my role in how I'm experiencing life? What is it that I'm doing that allows this experience to continue to show up in my experience? And the only one that can change it.
It's something that you are so right. It's something that is in front of our faces, yet completely transparent until it's no longer, right? And you can't unsee it, right? Once you're aware that it is a choice, you will engage with it. We'll play the video game. We'll sit down in the chair periodically. We'll get in there. We'll believe that we are all these situations. And hopefully through, the continued self-inventory and work, we have the ability to put the controller down and observe for a while. Sometimes you get pulled in longer than other times, right? But there's something to be said about meditation, exercise, contemplation, gratitude, meta meditation, loving kindness, all these things. There's something to be said for that. When you practice it as much as you can, it illuminates everything around you. It gives you a different perspective. It allows you to see that you're choosing to feel bad. And I know that that sounds horrifying to some people. And I'm not talking about the person that just went through a car accident or got their diagnosis with this, because you're raw at that moment. No matter what anybody's going to say, it's going to be, you don't understand, right? For a period of time. And if anybody can speak to that, it's you, right? Because I'm sure that you've had to look at that on several occasions, right? And I know that we've been going all over the place, but I do have a question for you, because we have listeners and people that listen to the show religiously that are in similar situations like yourself, right? And I love for people to be able to benefit from someone that has taken a step forward out of any form of victimhood and into what I like to call the new normal baseline, right? I try to describe to people that it's not that all the things that are wrong or perceived wrong, or the disabilities or the pain or the mental health issues or whatever comes along with what you have on your scorecard of, life, right?
Yeah.
That is there. But if you continue to live below your new normal, you've made a choice at that point to ignore everything above it. And I want you to explain to people what you believe the baseline is and how people can benefit from identifying that.
Ooh, what a great invitation. Thank you. I love that idea.
I've been doing this for a couple minutes.
Clearly.
I've been waiting to ask that question for a long time with the right guest.
Ooh,
it requires open-mindedness, and it also requires the understanding of your own place in your life.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Understanding, awareness, and accountability. That's the third component.
Accountability.
And it's interesting to say that, because the example I'm going to use for you here from my own experience is, most people who know me know that in October of 2022, I had a stroke. Leading up to that stroke, I was a paraplegic. Brain cancer was the diagnosis that I was operating within. And I had the most amazing doctors. But I also paired those doctors with my spiritual journey. My doctors were not the end all to be all to my life experience. They were part of my care team. And that care team didn't just include a nutritionist and, an oncologist and a dietitian and all of those people, but it also included a prayer practitioner, someone that I could call on a daily basis and just say, I need prayer today. Not even saying I need it for this, that, or the other, because needing this, that, or the other pigeonholes what, in my opinion, divine consciousness can do for us. So in October 2022, I had a stroke, and a dear, dear friend, my husband was here and cared for me, but a dear, dear friend came up from Grenada, the island of Grenada, and she sat at my bedside for 2 weeks. And she breathed life into me every moment that she sat next to me. And what that afforded me the opportunity to realize is that so many times we've all heard of NDEs, near-death experiences. And what I came to understand through having a travel partner that would sit next to my bed for 2 weeks and breathe life back into me, was that what I had was not a near-death experience. What I had was a fuller life experience. We call them near-death experiences. And if we look back at the history and the psychology of it and the science of it, 1975 is the first time anybody really began looking into what we now call near-death experiences. Dr. Moody was the first to write a book about it, to compile experiences. And so it's a really young idea. It's a very, it's almost still in its infancy when you think about 1975 to 2025.
That's a very small window of study.
Right. And it's also important to recognize that so many who have had that experience of what they would call, or what has been called on their behalf, a near-death experience, oftentimes that's coming from a medical perspective. You've got a doctor who says they were on the verge of death, whether there were vital signs that indicated that there was something physiologically that led a medical professional to say this person either was close to death or was dead for. And those are definitions that seem to be pretty universal. Death, dying, on the verge. What if what was really happening? And if we go back and we listen to the stories of these individuals, we're talking about light. We're talking about this overwhelming sense of love. And love not in a, oh, I'm going to get me some tonight, but love in a place of all is well and all is good. And so how do we translate all is well and all is good to a near-death experience? And for me, what became abundantly clear is that it wasn't a near-death experience. It was actually a fuller life experience where consciousness opens up to experience things that aren't the normal baseline of what we have on a day-to-day basis. And then to take that even one step further and to recognize for myself personally, to be able to be in that space, to reside in that space in full consciousness after this medical episode is not only available to me, but it's available to every human being. Because we are but consciousness expressed. And we've called it near death because we didn't know what else to call it. But what if that experience is really an invitation to see that life is so much bigger than we think? And that this moment of discord, of pain, of uncomfortableness, of anger, bitter, whatever the emotion, that it's but a snapshot. And it's an important snapshot because it's part of our experience. But if we shift our mindset from victimhood, something that's happening to me, to recognizing that I've had all kinds of life experiences and they have formed who I am without exception. but they are not my identity. I am not a stroke survivor. I am not a cancer survivor. I'm not even a woman. Take the labels away. I am divine consciousness being expressed. And some days I do it better than others. Some days I could really use a swift kick in the tush from the divine idea because I'm not very skilled in that day of how I'm expressing what I know to be true about life. But when I take the labels off, it frees me up to simply show up and to recognize that in a moment of challenge, there are as many blessings as there are lessons. And one does not show up without the other. We must look for it, though. Good old Fred Rogers. In a moment of crisis, what do? You look for the helper. So change the phrase, change what it is you're looking for. Look for the good, look for God, look for divine idea, look for the universe. The universe is here conspiring up to our benefit, no matter what you call it. Like something doesn't create our creation source. Again, whatever you believe that to be, the creator of something does not create something worthy of decimating it the moment it exists.
That's beautiful.
And while there are circumstances that bring all kinds of experiences into our lives, it's not an indictment against who we are. It's also not a verdict. It's an invitation. So I've had a stroke. I've had cancer. My first husband was killed by a drunk driver. I found out at 35 I was adopted. Had no idea. You begin to hear these stories about life and narratives, and it's so easy to adhere to the storyline.
The narrative.
Because that's who I am. No, it's not. It's something that happened in my experience, and it has formed who I am, but it is not my identity, and I will not allow it to be.
That's beautiful. It's something that a lot of people can benefit from hearing. And not because of anything more than you're showing them that they deserve the opportunity that is life.
Yes.
Right? It's a gift. It's called the present. It's aptly named, right? And it's all we get. There's no such thing as tomorrow. There's no such thing as yesterday. Take me there and prove it.
Today, imagining what tomorrow is going to look like. Because that's what fear is. Fear, expectation. Oh my gosh, that's a big one. How do I show up in life without expectation? Well, you get to learn how to do it, because expectation is nothing more and nothing less than imagination and projection for tomorrow. Look, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do the absolute best I can. I'm going to learn what I need to learn when I need to learn it, or when I don't learn it when I need to learn it, it's going to show up again and I'll get the opportunity again to learn it.
You have to ask yourself that question in life. If you find yourself at the same issue in different forms over and over and over again, it's because you have something to learn and step over. Address it.
And be blessed by.
Correct. Metal untested is just paper.
Right.
You going to trust it if it's never been put to the test? No. And it becomes a much better tool with time because you learn from experiences.
We learn from experience if we are present within them.
That's the rope analogy. I use this one on the show a lot. I like to use a rope as the person, and you go through life and you hit junctures that are maybe a trial or a tribulation by definition, right? You have a moment where you can either A, address it and go through it full force, or tie a knot in your rope, right? Most people do what? Tie a knot in their rope. And then they continue on.
Hold on for dear life.
And continue to go. And what happens to a rope that has been tied into knots over and over and over? It becomes an unusable mess that is no good to itself or others in any way, shape, or form. And until you sit down with that knot and realize that you can slowly unravel it until you get to the inside, you will see that you did it to yourself. Had you taken the opportunity to go through what it was in that moment, learn from it, and not let it define you, like you said, right? It's kind of like creating a new mask every time you go through an event, right? When you should be just adding a stripe. You don't need...
Or taking a mask off.
I like to call that authenticity.
Yeah.
We carry masks throughout life to defend us from, or to protect the child inside of us. We come up with them for every interaction we have. You have your mom mask, you have your dad mask, you have your I'm talking to AT&T mask, you have your I'm interviewing mask, you have I'm hanging out with my boys mask, we have girls night out mask, we have whatever you identify as mask. It doesn't matter. All the masks are out there. But what happens is all of them are tied to you by an invisible spider web. And you're trying to maintain all of these personalities, personas, what people think of you as a whole. And each one of those, you have to remember where you left off. You have to remember who that person is in your life, right? As they relate to that personality, because you put a different foot forward. That's not you. Nobody here interviews as themselves.
Right.
Right? So that is a personality.
Based on what we think the person needs. Correct. Or wants from.
And if you're not interviewing that way, you probably don't have many jobs, right?
Exactly.
Which is sad.
Totally. But take that back to our personal lives. Take that back to I'm not my brother's keeper. I am my brother. If I put a mask on because I think my brother expects something out of me in any given moment. And why would they expect that? Because that's what they're used to receiving from me. So the expectation is actually self-imposed because I've continued to show up for this person in a specific way, even though they're not changing at all. But if I am my brother and not my brother's keeper, how do I show up differently in that environment? Very different.
So I'm curious. We become a mirror. And we watch somebody, basically run themselves into the ground in front of us, right? There's going to be those times. I mean, more often than not, people will not change and they will run themselves to the end of their rope. And we have to bear witness to that in those moments, right? I'm curious, at what point do you stop becoming a mirror and start becoming an observer? Because the mirror still holds their image inside, right? But sometimes that image is going to cause the person pain that's receiving it after a certain amount of time. What does somebody do when they have to go ahead and cross that threshold of no longer remaining in front of them?
Ooh. Now what we do is we talk about an awareness mirror or an enlightened mirror, an enlightened reflection. I'm going to use an example here of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a really hard thing for people that have been through a lot of tragedy. It's a really big topic and it feels really heavy. And I think it's because we're not very clear on what forgiveness really is. So I did some work. I got my Windex out and I was polishing the bejesus out of that mirror, right? Because I needed to know what it was that was being reflected back to me.
Thank you.
And what I realized was that as the observer, as the friend, as the brother, as the sister in the scenario. It matters where we start. And that we always hold that in our thought, no matter how the other person's showing up. In Africa, there's a tribe of people where if you do something that would be against culture, norms, society, laws, however you want to phrase that, they don't ostracize you. They bring you into the middle of the tribe, and all tribe members are present, man, woman, child. They link arms, and each person goes around and tells the good about the person standing in the middle. There is not a moment spent on the misstep. But the belief is that that person has forgotten who they really truly are as a perfect, whole, complete being in the eyes of divine mind. And our job is to remind them of who they are. So when we take that mirror analogy, it's really important when we are awakening, when we are evolving and unfolding in our own growth, it matters how we see that person. Because the idea of forgiveness, in my opinion, is restoring in my thought what God knows to be true about that person, place, or thing. And you can replace the word God with universe, source, creator, I don't care. But it's the same idea. I didn't create that person. And I do believe that we were all created benevolently. And if I believe that we were all created benevolently, scriptural texts, spiritual texts of all faith backgrounds begin with a perfect, whole, complete being being created by a benevolent source. And if that's where we started, is that not what that divine mind sees when he looks at me and I keep screwing up?
Isn't that what we get angry at when we're looking into the face of someone that is not living up to the expectations that we have for their true capabilities or for their true
but listen
experience?
To what you just said.
I know what I said.
My expectation
of
your potential.
Yes. We believe that they have to live up to that.
An expectation.
Correct.
My expectation is to love them. My role is to love them. My purpose is to love them exactly where they're at. It doesn't mean I have to be fully engaged if they are exhibiting unhealthy behavior.
Can you repeat that?
It doesn't mean I'm condoning the behavior, especially if it's unhealthy. But when is the worst? Think about your darkest moment. Think about a time when someone that you looked up to, admired, appreciated, loved, and they walked away from you in a moment of need. I refuse to be that person that leaves an individual in a question of, am I going to keep fighting or am I going to give up? And when we walk away from people, when we walk away from them, we are casting a judgment. And we're actually feeding their self-fulfilling prophecy that they're unlovable, they're unworthy, they don't have what it takes. And so for me, it's that starting point of seeing them the way I want them to see me, the way I know that divine mind sees me on any given day, even when I'm screwing up big time. God doesn't love me any less when I make bad choices. He loves me differently, but he doesn't love me less. And so when we have someone in our experience that by modern terms is toxic, someone that just can't get their stuff together after how many years of having the same repeated conversation, we shift how we show up for them, when we show up for them. But we do not shift from showing up for them. Because if we do, it places us back in a position of being our brother's keeper and casting judgment.
They're not always going to like how you show up when you're in that new situation.
Exactly.
That's a hard thing to swallow, though. And as the person that is taking that new stance, that new way of showing up for someone that they love dearly, right? It's not going to be received well all the time. In fact, when you are a mirror, it requires you to see yourself, and it gets real ugly real quick, right? How do you hold on to that bull? Like that's a ride.
You're not holding on to anything.
No, I just mean like the whole scenario. When that push comes back, when you've become a new person, it's a new dynamic for a little while. And I'm speaking just from my own perspective. Like when you go from quote unquote enablement to a new scenario where you're giving them what they need versus what they want, that's a whole new ball game, right? What does that look like for that person?
Learning how to show up in that new way.
Oh, yeah.
Because that new way, it's the old adage, she finally found her voice. Oh, good. I don't know about anybody else, but when I first found my voice, I thought everybody needed to hear it.
They do.
And that's not well received by a lot of people.
No.
But if the way we show up for them speaks to our understanding for them, we don't have to understand what they're going through. But it's also not our job to fix it or change it. But change for an individual starts from a place of acknowledgement. And I guarantee the human psyche, when someone continues to show up for you, and you know you're not showing up very well for them, it shifts who we are. It brings to their awareness a need to show up differently. And they may ask a question. At first, they may fight it.
Mm-hmm.
I do. Look, when something new shows up, oh man, there is no possible way. She's going to have to figure that out on her own. There's a reason the universe put me in her experience at this time. So for me to say there's a reason you need to figure that out on your own completely disregards my accountability and my responsibility as a fellow human being. There's a reason the universe brought this up in this moment and that I'm present for it. What's the work I need to be doing right now? Because if I'm focused on the work I need to be doing, I'm less judgmental about the work I think she needs to be doing. And if I'm not focused on the work she needs to be doing, she's not feeling my judgment.
There is something to be said for felt judgment. Silent judgment has a target. It is not unfelt. You will feel it in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't have to be a red face in an argument. Just the simple fact that you're putting out disdain for another human, it's causing a reverberation of pain. It's going to get there.
It doesn't even have to be like a big feeling like anger.
No, the smallest amount. When I say disdain, I meant as a whole, like across all the micro.
Disappointed someone.
It's the worst. But that person sometimes wants you to feel.
Exactly. And there's a reason why it's coming up to feel that way. So instead of saying, oh, well, I don't want to feel disappointed, so I'm not going to spend time around that person. They need to get their stuff together. And once they do, maybe there's room in my life for them. The question now becomes, why am I feeling judged? Is it appropriate? Or am I actually judging myself?
That's what I like to ask myself.
As if they are judging me. Because self-condemnation, self-judgment, self-righteousness, all of that self stuff is as detrimental and almost more detrimental, because until we're aware of it, we can't shift to the way we engage with ourselves, our own being.
That's a narrative written in pen, not pencil.
I'm sorry?
That's a narrative written in pen, not pencil.
Right.
When you're doing I talk, when you're doing self-talk like that, you're putting a pretty permanent mark in your narrative that is very hard to go back and remove, or at least to be able to observe again.
Absolutely. It's the words we choose, not only when we're talking to ourselves, but when we're talking with another. And you notice there, I didn't say other.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we believe, and this is why it's really important for me, figuring out who and what we are is the foundational question. Because for me, when I realized that the question wasn't who am I, it's what am I? And I began to explore that question. Well, that, at least in this moment, has brought me to a belief that what I am is an expression of divine mind, and that we were all created perfect, whole, and complete. Well, that includes the person that's annoying the bejesus out of me right now, too. And if I can see them as an extension of myself, not an other, but another. Other
is outside of self.
Separation.
Yeah.
Another is a multiplication of, a duplication of, an extension of, an expansion of one source.
You wouldn't cut your own hand off.
Well, I might.
I'm saying if you observe it as part of yourself, you're less likely to remove it from yourself. If you're looking at people as extensions.
Yes, absolutely. And take that hand analogy one step further. I would never expect my hand to do what my foot is supposed to do.
You're so right. This is what we expect from ourselves in so many scenarios. Stop trying to be a fucking foot when you're a hand.
Exactly.
That's actually should be like the name of a book that explains this shit. I'm dead serious. Because if you walk around trying to be a foot when you're a hand, you're screwing up everybody's game.
Right.
Because nobody knows who you are and you don't know who they are. If everybody in the room is doing a masquerade, then we never know who true self is. Don't be a foot when you're a hand.
And don't be a label maker.
Oh, yes.
Don't be a label maker. I don't know about you, but it used to really rub me the wrong way when people would put a label on me, because it felt like it was something I had to acquiesce to. Oh, you're smart, you're pretty, you're funny, you're great at work, you're a great athlete. Pick whatever label you want.
Mm-hmm.
When we adopt someone else's label of who we are, then what we do is we forget that it takes two hands, not one, to do a certain job. Or it takes the lower extremities to get up and walk. It takes the muscles, and it takes the veins and the blood flowing, the circulation and the ligaments, and everything within the lower extremities has a job and has to communicate it to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
We are a whole being. And when we judge ourselves or another, we are not seeing a whole picture. We are pinpointing in on one thing. And when we do that, we forget its correlation to the whole. And look, I might need my left hand to take a chill for a while because it's not needed. So just because it can't do what my right hand is doing at the moment doesn't mean I'm going to go lob it off, because I might need it in an hour.
I like
for
this.
Whatever that task is.
But if it is lobbed off, live like an animal. A dog doesn't write a book or mourn the fact that it lost a leg. The dog lives a new life on 3 legs to its fullest potential. Simple as that. Right? So if you find yourself in a situation.
Dogs don't understand victimhood.
Correct.
And victimhood is nothing more and nothing less than a label that we have allowed into our experience.
Allowed. Chosen to become. I like the snow globe analogy in that it is a clear globe that you sit within that is life. And outside of it exists all the potentials and possibilities and thoughts and feelings, no matter what they are. And they swirl around you like a tornado. And if you reach your hand out and grab one and pull it in, you turn your globe that color, right? But the reality is, if you let it go, it goes back out, you turn back to the original clear. So if you continue to grab things out of this tornado, thoughts, feelings, labels, whatever they are, and hold them inside that globe, you're going to have a black cloud or a blue cloud or a red cloud, right? Let it go, or realize that those are temporary. They may be required to play the game, but don't go grabbing future issues. Don't go grabbing past issues. Work on one at a time. Enjoy it, right? Enjoy those moments. Oh, why not?
There's nothing in life that's not made easier by taking along a good travel partner. And it's important that we choose the right travel partner for the challenge that we're facing. And it may be a different person for every challenge that we have. But it's important in the face of that challenge for that travel partner to know what their role is. And their role is never to fix it for us. Their role is never to judge us. I don't know about you, but every human being I have met is pretty good at self-judgment.
How about
we don't need
a willing tool, an experienced tool, someone that can show up and be your experienced wrench in your toolbox. Place them back in there. Keep them by your side. Be their tool when it's time. Oh, man, I am being a tool. I can't believe I just said that. There's a soundbite somewhere for this, but be a tool, right? Be a tool for your friends. Be predictable.
Be a tool. Don't be a spatula in a moment where a knife is needed.
Oh, man, dude, I've been a spatula for a lot of shit I shouldn't have been.
Totally.
And thinking my spatula is going to solve their problem.
Right. And what does that do to the friendship?
Oh, it stresses the shit out of it.
Creates a chasm.
Yes.
Because you're trying to do something that's not needed. And they're feeling misunderstood, misheard, or misseen. So instead of just simply pulling up alongside and saying, dude, I got no blooming idea what you're going through. It must be hard. How can I help things be different for you?
How can I help is a much better way to approach people that are in the throes of something. Not what's wrong.
Right.
How can I help? Wrong.
Yeah. Or the question of is even finding that place. Take it one step further. Because when we're in the throes of a challenge, we may not know what we need. But if we were to come to our sister in need and say, man, I know this is really tough for you. I can see it in the way your life's unfolding right now. And I'm not 100% sure how I can help, but I'd love to help. How can I help you in this moment? Not how can I help you fix this situation? What do you need right now from someone who loves you?
Letting them choose removes your ego.
Yeah. And look, you may find out that you're not the person to meet that need, but at least you will have explored together a need that could be met. And you may know somebody who can meet it, but without asking, how can I help?
Action.
Maybe they're not thinking about how to get out of the darkness because they're so encompassed by it. But a question like, how can I help you in this moment? How can I be present for you right now? And that's hard to ask those questions that specifically, because what happens is we open ourselves up to rejection.
You know, I love going full circle. You can't
help me.
Be that light for them that shows them the first door. Just be there in your own way.
Really, truly are. Not how they're showing up.
No.
But what you know to be true about them. Go back to that tribe in Africa.
Absolutely.
And if you need to go through a litany of what is awesome about that person before you pick up the phone and call them, because you know it's going to be a hard call, take the 10 minutes to do it. It's a gift to yourself as much as it is the other person.
I like that. there's something to be said about putting good out into the world in those moments as well. That's why meditation's a thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you care for others, you make it a lot easier for them to care for you. Right. And if you love yourself,
to the golden rule.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. But take it one step further and be really honest, because we teach people how to treat us.
We do.
When we are the first person standing in line to self-deprecate, we give permission to people around us to do the same thing of us.
How do you expect somebody to love you if you don't love yourself? You made yourself unlovable in your own eyes. Who's going to see through that? Nobody.
And if we consider ourselves unlovable in our eyes, when we're trying to express love to someone else, it can be questioned. What's the ulterior motive? You don't take care of yourself this way. Why are you trying to do this for me?
You don't know the definition of love.
Right.
Until you can love yourself.
Start at home.
Yeah.
And we have to be honest about where we are in our own journey. And sometimes that honesty means I'm not in a position I can show up for you today. But that doesn't mean I can't send a text and say, hey, I was thinking about you. I hope you're having a better day. I just don't pick up the phone and invite myself into a place I'm not prepared to show up.
Ooh. Know your limitations and yourself.
Right. My identity, if my identity is based on how you receive me in the midst of your trauma, and you don't receive me well, pshaw.
Yeah.
No wonder I'm not showing up for myself very well, because I'm gauging my value on how someone else receives me in their darkest moment.
Just hold my hair and let me puke, man. Like, simple as that. Be cool.
Yeah. Sometimes the best gift we can give another is our undying silence. But our present silence, we're present for them. They know it. We're not trying to fix them, change them. We're not giving them answers. We're not asking them questions. They're not feeling condemned or judged. Mm-hmm. There's no self-righteousness. Because to pull up next to a person, physically or virtually, and simply say, I'm here. Now, if they're throwing punches, again, I might not be the right person to show up in that moment.
Yeah, no, I'm not. You don't expect. You don't take
we become a punching bag, right? We don't condone unhealthy or bad behavior, but we can shift that based on how we show up for that person, which means we have to be very present and aware in our own thought. Oh, so and so's going through this again. I need to call him and see how I can help. Wait a minute. What's the agenda?
Are you checking that block to make sure that you did something for this person like expected?
Right.
Yeah.
I was there to help them through it again. I'm such a great friend. No, you're
nobody
not.
Can say that I wasn't.
Right.
That's a huge one.
All of those things lead to nothing more and nothing less than ungodly self-righteousness.
None of those things are real.
Right.
They're all imaginary stances in a brain about interactions with other human beings, when in reality, all you have to do is just reach out your hand. They'll grab it when they're ready. Just show them that it's there. And when they get to that juncture, they can use you for assistance. I like to use...
How do we know that's true? Take a pack of wild dogs. They come up on something unknown. They are conditioned to be fearful, and they go into a place of protection. Give that pup a bowl of food and a little compassion, and he rolls over and lets you scratch his belly and doesn't want you to stop. If we can recognize where our friends are, where our coworkers are, where our family members are, and remember that we always must start from a place of awareness. Because sometimes that awareness says, reach out your hand for help. And sometimes that awareness says, you're not in a good enough space yourself to be of help to them. It's not about toxifying them and canceling them and removing them from your life. That's not helpful. We don't need to protect ourselves from someone else's behavior. We need to be aware of our functionality, our capability. We need to be aware of what we have to offer and what we don't have to offer and when that's appropriate. And it's not
self-worth and understanding of your position and where you're at is respect to you and to that person. Because why would you loan somebody, a hammer without a claw? That's a shitty thing to do. Like, I told you I had a hammer, but I didn't tell you that it was misbalanced and it doesn't have a back end on it. So,
or how about giving a hammer to a quadriplegic? I mean, let's use a real practical example there.
I love that you made that joke. That's amazing. You're so
Thank you.
That's like reaching out to shake a guy's hand that doesn't have an arm, right?
Totally.
It's pointless.
Totally. I've got this support group that I attend, periodically, and it never fails. You show up, you're in a support group for quadriplegics, and there's always someone that shows up that wants to shake your hand.
But isn't that person just not self-aware or aware of his surroundings? Because nobody does that intentionally.
Right. Yeah. It's not meant to be judgmental and it's not meant to elicit some sort of a response from me. That's how that person was attempting to show a sense of inclusivity. But for me, what I say is, I'd really love to shake your hand, but I did so much handshaking and baby kissing in my earlier lives that right now my arms are on a staycation.
But see, you're allowing somebody the opportunity to learn from their situation without condemning them on the spot. It's why I love comedy. Comedy shows great holes in reality and falsities and different scenarios without putting people on the carpet at the same time. It allows reflection. It allows individual reflection outside of the larger group, even if it was put on stage, because somebody can self-reflect.
In that moment.
What's that?
It allows a shift in that moment.
Yes.
A couple of weeks ago, I actually, from Denver, I was in St. Louis, my husband's college reunion, 50th college reunion, wow. And we are in a place we've never been before. And there's this huge flight of stairs. And somebody's like, okay, well, what are our options? And I'm like, well, duck and roll is always an option. Well, instead of it feeling like a heavy question,
right? You
shift the environment to where now we're solution oriented as opposed to, oh my God, we have a problem we have to fix. There's no problem that needed fixed. We just needed to recognize what the alternatives were. And truth be told, duck and roll was one of them. Not a preferred one, but it would have gotten me to the bottom of the stairs. Not sure how I would have gotten back up.
I would have peed my pants because my circle of friends are these people that have situations that we all openly laugh at and make, because who wants to be upset all the time?
Exactly.
Right? Like, I see a therapist every 2 weeks. I have a shrink. I have a doctor for my head injury. I have so many doctors that I make jokes about 24/7. Because why not?
It's all mindset.
It is. It's your new normal.
How we respond to it shows people how to respond to us.
Ooh.
And gives them an invitation to show up for themselves differently. I can't count how many people have said to me, AmiLynne, I have no idea why you have such a positive attitude.
You.
Like, is that like a backhanded compliment?
I don't know what that was.
Like so bad. How could you possibly be in a good mood?
I interviewed somebody one time that said this person had PTSD. And they went through a lot of stuff, and they said that people would walk up to them and think they were doing them a favor by saying, look, I have this, but it's clearly not as bad as yours. And
Right.
he's like, you're not telling me anything healthy here. You're telling me I'm more effed than anybody else.
Right. Right. Exactly. The
It's
whole
like, I get what you're trying to do, but it's not hitting the mark at all.
But that comes back to our original, just the onset of this conversation about we're not taught how to communicate.
No.
And so oftentimes our best attempt really falls short.
Recognize the attempt.
Exactly. If we can teach people to recognize the attempt by recognizing the attempt on our own, by shifting it with a bit of humor, by allowing for us to think about things differently because we say something a little off-colored or offhanded, it breaks the mesmerism of the moment.
You're so right.
And all we need to do is shift our thought from this is a problem to this is an opportunity. Because I got to tell you, I think I would look quite graceful ducking and rolling down a flight of stairs.
Oh, dude.
I'm not sure I could stick the landing, but you
would stick. I just don't know if they would go, or you would have a landing. I don't know.
It's not the fall that hurts.
No.
It's the landing. Exactly. So we get the opportunity to engage with people in a very different way because of our circumstances. But we have to be appreciative of that. Otherwise, the way we interact with people because of our circumstances actually shadows their experience in a very dark way too.
Know your role.
I get to show you how to engage with me by the way I engage with you, even in your darkest moment. I'm the kind of person that people know you don't avoid me in your darkest moment.
I'm that too.
Unless you don't want to be loved.
I love that.
Because I'm going to love you right where you're at. I'm going to acknowledge that this must be a really crappy time. What can I do in this moment, right here, right now? Because none of the rest of that matters to me. Do you need a joke? You need the reference of a good movie? How about an article that might lift you up?
Something.
Or do you just need someone to sit with you in silence, to see you as you are without judgment, for you to feel heard in your darkest moment? Is to be heard in our darkest moment, to feel seen in our darkest moment, is the invitation that we need oftentimes to come out of that darkness, to come out of that silence. But if we toxify those people and we cancel them, we may be the only person that invites them back into their own life.
We're also canceling a little part of ourselves that we don't realize.
Absolutely.
There is a dark void for every person that you don't allow to be loved in your life, or you don't love yourself. Whether you believe it or not, the person you hate the most is creating the largest void inside of you for hating them. The simple act is there, whether you like it or not. All those micro judgments, you're not proud. That's the bottom line. You're not proud, even though you're doing them or living in that form or life where you walk through and you're in a certain status and you have these judgments. Just because you're doing them doesn't mean they're not resonating inside of you. They're building up. Eventually, you're going to break down. You're going to break down because that all collects inside of you. It's equal and opposite.
And it's so imperative that we are clear about our own self-awareness. Because in order to be there for our friends, our loved ones, a stranger at the bus station, we have to be trustworthy. And trustworthy is not something that is an overt experience.
No, because everybody's lenses and prescriptions are different. They view people through.
Exactly. But if we don't trust ourselves enough to show up authentically, Ain't nobody going to trust us enough to reciprocate, to ask for our help, to receive our help, even if they ask for it. If they don't trust us because they recognize, and they may not realize that the reason they don't trust us is that they recognize we don't trust ourselves. That takes a lot of deep introspection, but that's where trust starts. Trust starts internally. And if I don't trust myself with the information I'm sharing or the way I'm showing up or my motives for helping another, it is felt by another. And there's nothing we can do to keep that from being felt. And when we do that, we are actually fulfilling their self-prophecy that they're not valued, they're not worthy. She's got to put on a mask to come help me. And how do I know that? Because she didn't do that shit for herself. So her coming over here and trying to fix me, it allows our ego to have this very different conversation with what's really happening. And all of that could be avoided in a place of being self-aware enough that when we're showing up, first we show up for us, for ourselves, because we cannot show up for another unless or until we are authentically showing up for ourselves. It won't be trusted. It won't be received.
By the simple inauthenticity of itself.
Yeah. Everybody leaves that space.
Nobody believes somebody that doesn't believe what they're saying. You can tell me all day long something about yourself, but if you don't believe it, I'm never going to receive it. It's just not going to happen. Right? We're coming up on about an hour and 15 minutes. And I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find you, where they can hear these amazing analogies, metaphors, and get this great advice so that they have the chance to thrive, not survive. I'm real easy. Everything's my name, AmiLynneCarroll.com. Instagram is where I hang out the most, AmiLynne Carroll. I've got a Facebook, AmiLynne Carroll. My website, though, I'm going to encourage you, if you need someone to just sit with you, no judgment, no expectation, no agenda, I have a feature on my website that says, leave a message for AmiLynne. Reach out and leave me a message. And guess what? Babs will call you back. That's amazing.
And I look forward to holding that space for your listeners or anyone out there that's having a rough day. And just look, you don't have to have answers. Look, I don't have all my answers. I sure don't have answers for you. But we can all talk and we can all be present with each other the best we're able. And that's what I invite people to do. Come visit my living room on Facebook or Instagram or my website, but give me the opportunity to show up for you because you deserve it and you're worth it. And I want to.
Beautiful.
And I look forward to doing so.
Thank you so much for doing what you do and being who you are. I see you and I appreciate you. And I know that everybody that listens is going to appreciate this episode as well. I like to leave off with my favorite metaphor, and that is that our job is to be a lighthouse, right? It's to stand up and be whatever form of lighthouse we are in the most authentic way that we can, to love ourselves and to give people cues from how we treat ourselves and how we exist, that it is okay for them to exist in the same manner, authentically, without judgment, and to step off of what is not a cliff, but a curb. I like to think that people stand on the authenticity cliff with a blindfold, only to find out when they step off, it was just a curb. Yeah. Being yourself is the easiest thing to do once you love yourself, right? So I appreciate you. Thank you for being a lighthouse for others to take cues from and find their way.
Thank you for being a lighthouse. And for each person, each one of us, that's the key. Each one of us is a lighthouse.
Yes.
Whether we want to be or not, someone in our life is looking to us for how to be. And that's why it's so important that we recognize that we are lighthouses, that we are a beacon for others, and do our best on any given day to show up the best we're able.
I love that. Thank you. And remember, everybody, be cool and keep learning.